From Press Communications LLC, this is Jersey Shore Matters with Diane de Oliveira.
Easter Seals, New Jersey has reopened its day habilitation program statewide in Lacey, Sayreville, and Oakhurst more than a year after the COVID-19 pandemic forced them to shut down. Hi, I'm Diane de Oliveira, and joining me today is Cristina Jones, Vice President of Population Health at Easter Seals, New Jersey. Thank you so much for taking time for the interview, Cristina.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss such an important topic.
Christina, for people who aren't familiar with the day habilitation program, can you just provide some background on how it works?
We provide a safe space for individuals who have intellectual or developmental disabilities to attend services where we help them experience new skills, socialization, and opportunities to contribute to their communities. Some activities that we participate in with our consumers include cooking, health and fitness, arts and crafts, self-advocacy, and job and social skill building with their peers and, of course, with our staff.
How difficult has the pandemic made it for Easter Seals New Jersey to continue these programs as far as funding?
COVID-19 hit us very hard, like many of other agencies throughout the state. Even though we could not provide in-person services, we did pivot and provide virtual services, but really it's not the same. From a funding perspective, all virtual services that we provided, 50% of that revenue we had to give back. So it was half of what we could have achieved if we were in person. Also during COVID, we still had the high infrastructure costs. We still had to pay rent on our buildings. We still had to pay leases on our vehicles, which is about $43,000 a month. And every other infrastructure cost we would have had if we were in person, we still had to pay those, even though we were forced to close.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a lot of expenses that you mentioned. You mentioned that you were able to pivot virtually for some of the programs, but how difficult was that? I mean, I can see maybe cooking classes. How was the response from the people you serve? Were they able to follow along virtually? Was it too difficult, or how did that work out? Were there things that you'll continue to do that might have been positive that to come from the pandemic? And what were some of those challenges?
Right. Yes, we were faced with challenges, and the reception was variable depending on the technology, accessibility, and if the individual was in a group home versus being in an individual home. We did have quite a few consumers that did not have access to technology. So one thing that we did do was implement a learning library, or a lending library, I should say, where we would provide a laptop or a tablet to individuals, and so that they would be able to join us on the Zoom calls. But one key question that you did ask was about how individuals were able to follow along. So if you think about just using the cooking example, we weren't able to have the individual's hands-on cook, but what we were able to do is provide a lot of them with the materials to be able to make some things at home. So we had to pivot from, like, say in center, we would make brownies or cupcakes. We would do something with less ingredients that would be easy to follow along using the Zoom platform. We did also see that it was difficult to engage some of our consumers, especially those that are nonverbal. So we had to work extra hard and provide extra animation so that we could have people follow along. We also had people that would log in and leave. So we had staff that would call the individual homes or the group homes to check in to see if we could have the consumers try to stay engaged a little bit longer, or if there were different activities that we could do in order for us to increase the engagement.
Sure.
Some things that we did learn during using the virtual services was the usage of virtual field trips. And so I think that is something that we will continue to do, even though we are reopening in person, because we might not have the funding or the opportunity to go to many different places all the time. But the virtual field trips was a way for our consumers to feel as if they were at the zoo, or to have individuals come on and show different animals or show different art pieces, so they felt like they were outside of their homes and at a field trip.
Yeah, that is positive. And I think just for anybody during the pandemic, there were, museums that opened their virtual doors and different places, historical sites that you might have not been able to get to in person, but you could see those virtually. So I think that's great that you'll continue to do that. And as you mentioned, with funding and things like that, presenting challenges, that's still a way to bring something positive to your clients. Before we get more into the funding and some things that are being done, I just want to remind our listeners, if you are just tuning in, I'm Diane DeOliveira, host of Jersey Shore Matters, and I'm speaking with Cristina Jones, Vice President of Population Health at Easter Seals, New Jersey. So you were talking about how funding is really critical and how the pandemic really hurt that because you still had expenses of rent and vehicles and things like that. What is the organization doing to try to increase that funding? Are you talking with state lawmakers, and what has their response been?
So just to provide a little bit of background, there were already some issues regards to funding prior to the pandemic. The pandemic only highlighted those funding issues for us. So pre-pandemic, we were operating 9 rehabilitation sites. We had to reduce those numbers down to 5 rehabilitation sites across the state. When the program moved from a contract-based reimbursement to fee-for-service, we experienced a 25% decrease in funding, and also the reimbursement rates don't cover, for some of the consumers, for us to be able to provide the care and the transportation that's a requirement. So we have been meeting with different state key decision makers, and we've asked them to consider a few solutions. So some of those solutions include enacting a supplemental appropriation for an 8% rate increase for rehabilitation programming across the state. So that would be approximately $16 million in state funding. We've asked them to increase reimbursement rates for those individuals that are in A, B, and C tiers by at least 15% in the next state budget so that we can ensure long-term sustainability. We've asked them also to remove transportation requirements from rehabilitation program rates so that service agencies can be reimbursed for that cost. 2 other things that we are speaking with state leaders include reimbursement programs for holding spaces for absent participants. At 33% of the rate, agencies would be able to bill if that individual would have attended for the day. And lastly, we've asked for flexibility for setting rates in more expensive parts of New Jersey to compensate for higher overhead costs incurred by different agencies.
What has the response been so far? A lot of programs suffered cuts and are having to, trim their budgets. What has the response been so far? You mentioned how, pre-pandemic there were issues and the pandemic only highlighted those. So are you getting any positive feedback yet, or are they willing to work on some of these requests?
Right. Sure. So we've received great response to the request. I believe that we're waiting for a final vote for some of these things to be included in the next state budget. So we're really hopeful that we'll get the rate increase. I'm not sure if we'll get everything that we asked for, but everyone has been so supportive, and we have so many individuals that have signed things and took it to the state so that we can have the increased rates, not just for Easter Seals, New Jersey, but for all agencies that offer rehabilitation services throughout the state.
How many individuals does Easter Seals, New Jersey currently serve for its day habilitation programs, and what was it before the pandemic? Has that gone up or down?
So pre-pandemic, we had over 500 individuals that participated in day habilitation programs. Currently, we are still ramping up across the state, but we have about 350 consumers. So we unfortunately did lose some to the pandemic. And some we're still trying to engage with to bring them back post-pandemic. Some families are still afraid of individuals contracting COVID, so they've opted to wait until the fall until things are a little bit more stable. But we do have our staff reach out, and sometimes we also do drop-bys and bring little gifts just to check in on the consumers that aren't active with us at the time.
I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for families during this to, have this program be shut down for the pandemic and then having to, take over that responsibility at home. What were some of the biggest challenges for families, and how much of a relief is it for them now that the programs are up and running again?
Right. It was very difficult. If you can imagine having a process where you can have somewhere for your loved one to go every day, to having them in the house every day, trying to figure out how can you engage them? How can you still try to help them? We've seen a lot of individuals who've regressed during COVID because they weren't with their friends. They weren't in programs where they received different skills and training and conversation every day. We had quite a few parents that would call us and ask us, when are you opening? And we would have to share with them, we need to wait until we have guidance from the Department of Developmental Disabilities. So I will share that parents are excited, those that have opted to return to programs so far, that their loved ones are able to come back. And we're doing the best that we can to reassess where they were pre-COVID and what they might need post-COVID. But parents are really excited that their loved ones are back with us.
Now, since the pandemic, are there any programs that you were doing pre-pandemic that you cannot bring back or had to change because of this virus?
Actually, no. When we first received the green light to reopen, there were some stipulations, and we could only open up so much percentage of our pre-COVID numbers. But at this point, we're able to open as if we were pre-pandemic. The only thing is we don't know if everyone is vaccinated or not vaccinated. So there is guidance if you're not vaccinated to try to wear the face mask. And with this population, sometimes that's a little difficult. So we do include that as part of our day, teaching them the importance of wearing the mask and the social distancing. But the only thing that we need to be careful about at this time, if we're going outside of the center, to ensure that individuals are still social distancing and being safe. But we're able to open our programming as it was pre-pandemic.
Well, that's great news. Cristina, we have about 2 minutes left. Is there anything else about Easter Seals New Jersey's habilitation programs that we left out that you want to mention? And if there's people who are interested or need more information, what can they do?
I would just like to state that day habilitation aligns directly with our mission here at Easter Seals New Jersey. We need to prioritize them, and they need the funding in order from the state level to ensure that our most vulnerable continue to receive the services that they need. In regards to Easter Seals New Jersey, we are continuing to ramp up, meaning we're hiring DSPs. So anyone that is interested in working with individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, please reach out to us at on our website. And someone from our recruitment team will reach out to you. And I guess lastly, we need to figure out the funding because this is key. These individuals, they need us. And if we were to not have day habilitation, we don't know what would happen to our participants and their families. And that's the result that no one wants to see.
Cristina Jones, thank you so much for being a guest on Jersey Shore Matters. She is the Vice President of Population Health at Easter Seals, New Jersey. Please stay safe.
Thank you so much.
You can hear Jersey Shore Matters with Diane de Oliveira every Sunday morning on Press Communications, LLC.